Good afternoon. I'm so glad you all are here with me today. Um, this is our session on teaching history to kids under or 10 and under during an age of book banning. Um, this session is going to be part of me kind of giving a little bit of history and then turning it over to us as a collective to answer a few questions and see how we can move forward in our homeschooling journey, um, focusing on history and telling those stories that most often are not getting told. So I'm so excited that you all are here with me today. And thank you all for joining me. So let's get started. First off, can everyone see my screen? I just shared this. Awesome. Okay. First of all, there we go. Oh, wonderful. Okay. Um, so I'm Sherri Mehta. Um, I am originally from Richmond, Virginia, and have been living here in Maryland for since 2011. And came into homeschooling during the time of the pandemic in 2020, and we have just continued. This is our fourth year, and we're going strong. I feel like I've kind of come full circle getting started homeschooling. I leaned in on the Black family homeschool educators teaching initially, and now as the last one I'm able to present, it just seems kind of surreal. So what we're going to do today, welcome and introductions. I want to do a small segment of opening the space and then kind of talk about my history with history. I want to give 4 strategies that will help when we think about engaging our young people in history and learning those stories that are often neglected, omitted in a traditional school setting. And then I'd like to use the remainder of the time for discussion, questions, and answers, and then we'll move on. So first, let's open the space. I would love for each of you to kind of think of an ancestor, um, ancestors, those you may be able to call by name. You don't have to call them out by name, but I would like for you to invite them here in our space today because we're going to be leaning on their stories, our stories, as we talk about history. So just take a moment to reflect on um, ancestors whose names you may be able to recall, and please invite them and welcome them into this space. All right. So, surprise, surprise. So my name is Sherri Mehta, and I am not a historian. I am actually my area of specialty is 19th century African American literature. So this picture here is me at a historical convention, a history convention in Missouri in 2018, 2019, I believe. Um, and here I am, the English person hanging out among the historians. Um, a little bit about me and my approach can better help you to understand how I use stories to teach history. My specialty in my area of research is the United States colored troops, specifically looking at the epistolary theory, which is letter writing. So even though I have long been a lover of history, I have always sought to find these stories that bring people to life. I say that history can sometimes be, kind of sterile. It's the data, the facts, statistics. But sometimes when we take that literary approach, we get a little bit deeper and we find connection. Um, I taught high school English for many years and then came to Morgan State, taught there for a few years, still studying English and wanting to continue to blend literature and history. So Zoriel Hurston is one of my all-time favorites. And she says research is formalized curiosity. It's poking and prying with purpose. And that's what I try to model to our young learners, that anything that you start to poke and pry with purpose is research, even if it doesn't feel that way. So here I am, the English person, hanging out amongst the historians who usually say that the English people are more fun anyway. But I'm also a member of the Quander family, which is one of the oldest recorded Black families in America, who are able to trace their roots back to an original ancestor, Igia Quando from Ghana, Africa. And I'm also the third great granddaughter of Jefferson Mickey, who fled a Virginia plantation and freed himself, liberated himself to join an Illinois United States Colored Troops Regiment during the Civil War. Um, and he would ultimately go on to be present in Galveston, Texas, at the reading of General Order Number 3, that serves as the springboard for the celebration of Juneteenth. Um, my love of my own family's story or history has propelled me to continue to find the hidden stories. Um, and through my research, it was looking at letters, actual letters that Civil War soldiers left behind, that gave their feelings, not someone else interpreting it or cleaning it up for us, but what they actually said. So my life's work has centered around finding the stories and making those connections. And so, what I've gone on to do in homeschooling is to provide those opportunities for our young learners to get a more hands-on approach um, to studying history and to realizing that we are not separate from history, that we are history, our families are history, and that the purpose of history, in a sense, is to enter this realm, this historical space of our ancestors, find their stories. And sometimes it's not necessarily their individual story, but it's a story that gets us closer to their reality. And I think in so doing, it brings history to life and makes it more purposeful. So my approach is for not just those who are 10 and under, but also for every age. I'm the founder of Freedom Fighters, Freedom Writers, which focuses on telling those stories of the United States Colored Troops and giving hands-on experiences to young learners so they can see exactly how those troops composed letters, what they sent in those letters, the language that they used, the materials that they used as well, and understanding the depth of those letters and how they create a letter writing tradition all their own. I also operate a book club for high school and middle school students. And though we're reading literature, we're really grounding ourselves in history and finding out what's going on for our protagonists or the characters in our novels. Why are they facing the obstacles that they're facing? How are they dealing with them? What is the historical component therein? So I wanted to think about what approaches I have used that have worked, because even though I love um, English literature and history, my young learners who are under 10 could give or take. Most times, we'll take it or leave it. Most times they can leave it. Um, their interests are in coding and science and math and things that I was just like, whew. So they put me to the test in making it exciting and engaging for them. And here are just four approaches that I have used um, and that we continue to use. So one is approaching literature through stories. Um, we want to use picture books with our young learners or interactive books, focusing on those from our own voices, own voice perspectives first, and then really digging into the history that could be left untold or untaught. Um, the 1619 Project, okay, that's like thinking of books that are banned. But if we don't understand the history therein, then we're missing key components, right? Just in studying, looking at MLK, celebrating Martin Luther King's Day, explaining to my children that there's a reason that we have this day to celebrate, that we are honoring this particular leader in our community, and this is why. But we have to get to the root of that. And using picture books is a great way to enter into that conversation. One, we can find the pictures, we can talk about the art, the artists, and then using those opportunities to work together, the reading aloud, and then asking questions throughout, finding those picture books that really kind of hone in on a specific area of interest or a person, a forgotten voice or a figure can bring history to life. If we're wanting our young people to find themselves in their voices, it's often exposing them to those other people whose voices have been captured and placed in word form for us to read, for us to experience. I'm also kind of keen on interactive books, pop-ups, lift the tabs, any of those, really kind of engaging our learners and getting them their hands in there, getting their senses kind of alerted. Those are great starting points. And usually from a picture book, you can branch off to some sort of art activity that allows the young learners to make some deeper connections. Thinking about things that could be, or parts of history that, we have to go over the Constitution. How can we make that fun using interactive pieces, interactive books that help with that? So for my student, I've got a few picture books here from our home collection. And while it's harder to say, let's sit down and learn about this and pull out, a timeline, it might be a little bit easier for me to engage and like at least let us enter the space by saying, oh, I've got this awesome book. Anybody want to sit down here and read this with me? And then that usually kind of gets the ideas flowing. Oh, okay. Oh, that looks like such and such, or oh, I've been there. Oh, I've heard of that, or I've seen that before. Um, Last year, my my oldest homeschooled son, he's playing the piano and wanted to know of other people who were playing piano back in the day. So we took that opportunity to find a book just on Scott Joplin. Really beautiful picture book, but then that connects to something that he's interested in. And here's the book that kind of gives his life story, how he's coming into music. And that's a way to see yourself in literature. So, stories. I really do believe in the power of stories and using those. There are also tons of websites and spaces where you can find own voices for authors. So if I'm looking for a story, even on something say like native culture, I'm looking for a native author to tell that story. Okay. Um, and the second approach is still story based, but moving in a little more closer to home, literally. We're going to use our family stories genealogy, the ancestors, as our approach to teaching history. So really, that's in an attempt to make a deeper connection. Maybe it's a chance to find your roots, or maybe it's a chance to share what you're doing. Um, there are elders amongst us who have experienced things, who have seen things, who have been part of history. One way to kind of bridge the generational gap is to have our young people talk to our elders before they're gone, ask stories, and then see how they were a part of history. Whether or not their names are in a book, they are a part of history. Um, it's cool to kind of go back as far as you can, and see who you found and align that person with what's going on historically. So, some kids may be interested in doing a physical timeline. Those are a wonderful hands-on way to kind of track and see the passing of time. Um, if you have pictures, of ancestors and their names, show them. You could do a traditional family tree, sure, yes, but you don't have to do that. You could do it just as you are showing and sharing, um, this family member, putting dates of their, birth and death, where they lived, and then what's going on during that time. Um, One thing that we have tried this year, and to kind of bring it to life, is using paper dolls. If you have kids who are interested in paper dolls, using them, if you have the names of ancestors, using them as a means to say, okay, here we have these people and this is where they are. Um, you can combine your ancestor stories to say perhaps a protagonist in a contemporary, or a protagonist in a story who is the contemporary of your ancestor. Um, that could be one way of helping our young learners see that these are real people, um, that came before me, who were related to me, and they were part of what's going on here in history. Um, you could take a map, physically having your young person move people around on the map if you're teaching the transatlantic slave trade. Um, Finding which areas that they were, living in during which part, and kind of deep diving into that and finding books that, give a little bit more information to bring that person to life. Um, the premise here is saying that American history isn't distant. It is our history. It's made up of our narratives. And when we find the family story, um, in history, we can tell it, we can share that. Um, Juneteenth, thinking about where do people live? If you have family members in Texas, or in Galveston, Texas, more specifically, is there anyone there who could talk about that experience? Um, so in that way, we're combining our own family story, our own family genealogy, and then linking that with some of the stories that, some of the storybooks, picture books that you may have, and then creating a larger picture, but a more personal one as well. The third approach, kind of links to this, and it's the teaching to the senses and through experiences. And this is where the field trips come in. They can be virtual field trips. There's so many amazing virtual field trips. And now Tracy's got me, excited about the metaverse. You can get into, I guess, a place in the metaverse and take a field trip. Field trips are great. Museums, hands-on. Oh my goodness, don't forget your national parks. Um, there are junior ranger badges, and there's one that even focuses on the Underground Railroad. So there are materials and resources there, and you just have to get there. You're able to work on the sheets and the handouts, and then you go and you get your badge. Um, that's one way to engage. Also, you'd be surprised at places and spaces close by that you can utilize. There is an historical place near everyone. How can we link that? If you're in Maryland, just going down to the harbor in Baltimore, we can talk about Frederick Douglass and him actually being here. Sometimes it requires us to do a little research on our end to figure out, oh, wow, there's this wealth of information here and history right here on and at our very feet, at our fingertips, and then bringing the kids into that. This picture on the upper left hand that looks like Stonehenge, that is not. It is called Foamhenge. But I looked around trying to find something that was, we were doing ancient and medieval history for my two boys at the same time. And we said, well, what can we find for ancient? We're not going to find any, anything here in the States. Oh, there's a farm in Virginia, Cox Farm. They have Foamhenge that's an exact replica. But just having the kids go there and see this is exactly how it's, this is exactly how big these blocks are, okay? These stones are. If your family takes trips, summer vacations, finding those opportunities where you are that you might be able to connect directly to your history. Um, what things can kids taste? People eat, everybody eats. Um, Even if it's down to cuisine and food, are there things that can engage the senses so that our young people realize that um, these historical figures also ate, and this is the clothing that they may have used, or the type of combs and brushes that they used, or the shoes. These are how the shoes were made during the day. Um, Making it come alive, making it accessible to our young kids, I think has made all the difference. These are smiles here of genuine satisfaction, which sometimes when we get into history could be a struggle for my kids who are like, can we just get to the science and the math? But there's also science and math and history. And sometimes finding that, making those connections, history, studying history from an art-based approach, studying history from um, a STEM based approach or from a literary approach. Even for students, for my students in my book club, we were reading Elijah of Buxton, which is a wonderful book by Christopher Paul Curtis that talks about the town of Buxton in Canada, the last stop on the Underground Railroad. They offer virtual, they have a virtual tour of one of the log cabins from the original settlement. Um, their schoolhouse, their barn. You can actually just go in and pan around for this 3D tour and see all of the materials that students would have used, where the potbelly stove was in the classroom. So when you dig into the novel, you can actually see and envision and feel what's going on. Um, and here's a picture. We're at Assateague, where they have the junior rangers to come out and do a program with the kids, um, building community and then using that community to study history together um, is another key component of really making it solidify, making it stick, making it a memorable experience and feeling. And then my last approach is teaching to areas of interest. And this looks like um, unit studies. I love a good unit study. It fills in so many different parts and pieces, and then it really digs into what the students, what your young person um, is most interested in. Um, Building on those special interests, it's also student led, and we know that when we're allowing students to kind of take the lead and tell us what they want to learn, there's 45% um, more retention of information. Um, those unit studies also allow for deep dives, but to be modified on different levels, especially if you have more than one child in your home. You may be able to do a unit study that addresses learning goals for different grade levels. Um, Say that one of maybe your young learners interested in video games. It could be something as simple as looking at the history of video games, different people who have been integral in that. Maybe looking at a specific game and kind of finding the history of that as well. But then you might want to include some geography. Where are they from? What's the science behind building that? Okay, can we write about the 3 or 4 step process to completing a certain game? Um, Building on that interest and then making sure that we're kind of creating a tapestry, a learning tapestry where students our kids realize that everything is kind of interconnected. It's all interwoven. And when we touch one thing, it's touching another, and we're expanding our whole experience there. Books, field trips, art classes, all centered on that one thing and trying to find as many approaches through different core subjects as possible. I found those things to work or to have the most reward in terms of my kids and what they enjoy learning. And they're able to tell with such excitement what it is that they're doing. There's something about seeing their faces light up or them wanting to do something or asking, requesting to do something. Um, and it's based off of how it's been presented to them and how much control they have over that, which is really important. So those are the 4 approaches that I have. We want to teach through stories, teach through our ancestral stories to make that connection. Um, we want to teach with our young learners' senses in mind. What is it that they like? Um, Music, food, art. What things can we see, hear, touch, smell, experience in ourselves, and then allowing them to take the lead and then weaving the history in with that. Um, Here's my website here, and you can also find me on OutSchool. And I would like to open up the floor for discussions, questions and answers, and then I would like to get you all to do a little activity with me. So let me stop sharing. And any questions or comments or strategies that you have found in your own homeschooling practices that you think bring that history to life?
Hey, Sherri.
Hey, Carlos.
Nice. I struggle with the history part, and just sharing something that I personally do is that we kind of go backwards. So if, say, we're out and I see the hot sign on at Krispy Kreme, right? And then we'll stop, and then we'll start like, when was it founded? And then what other kinds of companies were started then? And then, now it's corporate, but was there a family that started that? And then who else made, then how did they make that back in the day? And like we go backwards that way. And so I find it more enjoyable that way. And my kids kind of tolerate it a little more. So I just wanted to just kind of share that too.
And I think it's because it's, oh, they feel that it's more relevant. Like that's closer to me. Oh,
Right.
okay. There's my kids for a while were into when were fast food restaurants, like how did they come about? And, you know, which one came first, McDonald's or, Burger King. And we were able to do a little research, but then also using the television. There's the foods that made America, the toys that made America, and then allowing them to kind of to pick one. Which one do you want to do? Oh, there's one on donuts. Oh, okay. There's
Right.
one on ice cream. Oh, here's the one on McDonald's. Um,
Sometimes we go backwards on the for things that we save. Like I remember having a discussion about um, what does it mean by hanging up the telephone? Hanging up the telephone. They had no concept of that,
yes.
and then sometimes getting the modern versions of things. So my for Christmas, my oldest, her I think it was her uncle gave her a record player for Christmas. Of course, it's Bluetooth enabled and all this other stuff.
I
But
think I have that one too.
now she's buying albums though, which is just hilarious. So and then she started exploring like, like what is this thing made out of, and how are these grooves? And got a magnifying glass and started looking and
Yes.
and all that stuff. So it was it's disheartening to see things I saw as a child. They see as something that needs to be in a museum, right?
Yes.
But the history of that, it's appealing to them. And then, like you said, weaving. So you have the history, but you also have the science, right? And then the cultural references and all that too. So it can be pretty meaningful that way.
Yes. So that right there is a unit study, and you didn't even know it. Taking that one question and then building around it those resources. So just like you're saying with the record player, when I got mine a few years ago, the kids didn't think much of it, but I, play some songs. What is that? And why is it that popping sound? Can you get rid of that popping sound? And so we're talking, well, this is one way. And then, oh, I here's a cart, an 8 track. Like, what is that thing? Well, this is what you also used in your car when you're, went to play music. My kids were just amazed, you know, but now
Right,
it's all on, your phone, and how does
right,
that happen? And that
right,
answers, it goes into so many different questions. And building the unit study just on, say, on MLK Day. Um, you can look at the rhetorical, the speeches, you can look at his history and the biography, the geography of where he is. But then if we want to get down into it, let's talk about the music of the movement, not just the music of the civil rights movement, and the music that the kids sang during the children's march, but also how music was used to kind of soothe those souls when his assassination had been announced and people just went, you know, the
that whole
relief.
idea, where were you when?
Where
Right.
were you when?
Yeah.
And that is how we can connect history to us. Where were you when? Oh, I remember when this happened, I was here. Why don't you ask, great aunt so and so or great grandma so and so? Do you remember X, Y, and Z? Or tell me about a certain time. Um, you've got that. There are picture books to accompany it. Everyone's got some sort of unit study online, so you don't have to, recreate the wheel. It's been done for you. Um, Using AI, Carlos, for, yeah, I had referred my friends, Sonic. Okay, there you go. There's a whole unit study right there down to how we can work that in health. Um, when history is not seen as this dusty book on a shelf of people who weren't really significant to us, in a grand scheme, kids are thinking about the immediate. something that's closer, that seems so far removed, but not when I say, oh, this was great grandmommy, or this was granddaddy's mom, this was granddaddy's grandmother. He's like, oh, so this is someone they were living during this time. I cannot say enough about incorporating art, allowing students to express or respond to history through art, whether they're building something, crafting something, drawing something, and even down to food. Food can be an art form as well. How are we using that? How is that an expression, an artistic expression? Um, and how are we linking that to our loved ones? When our kids realize that they are history, they are participating in history, um, it allows, I think, for them to see how important it is and how important they are. So, what I would like for everyone to do before we've got some time, and I wanted us to everyone to think of one ancestor that you can one ancestor now, and you can think of the time period in which they lived, and to share maybe that story with our group and how we can use that as a lesson. I'd also like you to think of your child's special interest, one special interest here, and how we can come together and use that as a springboard for a lesson. All right, anybody want to share? Think of one ancestor. Let's do our first one ancestor and then the time period they lived in.
Oh, I told my kids this story about my paternal grandfather, who I used to stay with during the summers, my grandparents. And when he had bought some land, and we grew up in Tennessee, in southern Tennessee, in a pretty rural area. And when he bought the land, the hardware stores didn't want to sell him nails. And so when he was building the house, he would just go to random places and find nails and other materials and things that he couldn't
Wow.
get to finish building their home. I mean, that home is still, it still exists to this day, you know. And and so I tell them just, even with technology and things that were available to us and available to our ancestors, even though these things exist, they weren't always available to us as as people of color. And so they had to find creative ways to solve those real problems in that way. So to have some appreciation of kind of how far we've come
Yeah.
and being, very dealing real world problems in a very unfair world sometimes. So yeah, that's what came to mind. So thank you. I haven't thought about that in a while. So
And from there, thank you for sharing that, Carlos, because like literally from there, okay, so what area in Tennessee? Okay, so what's going on during that time period? I wonder if we could dig around and see what stores may have been open or available. Is there any trail there? Do we have anything? Are there any stories or books about this area in Tennessee? Are we able to see a street view? Are we able to see any pictures? Can we go back and like, let me do a search for, African American communities in Tennessee in 1950? What do we see? And even there, it's like we're transported in time, and being transported in time and seeing that you could just you're viewing this picture, but if you just closed your eyes and imagine that you are there, they just didn't capture you when the photographer snapped that picture, and then you're just that much closer. What were the crops of the time, any of those little things that then allow us to see what was the day-to-day life and existence like for my ancestors, and how is that how can I compare and contrast that to my life now? All right, Des, oh my gosh, 86 years old. My maternal grandmother who just passed last month. Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Who was 86 years old, told us stories about how everyone in the family all lived on the same street and how close everyone was. They also lived in the South. So they depended on each other. Yes, indeed. Yes. Um, and it would be interesting to see where in the South. Um, there are free resources if you want to start doing a little more genealogical research. Um, I don't know if your young one would want to do the research with you and sit there with you while you go through it, but you could always have the have the information and then present that and weave that into your own lesson. Um, familysearch.org. Let me put that in the chat. Is anyone familiar with that one? Oops. Familysearch.org. You're able to look up usually see documents with no paid subscription. Um, challenge yourself to think of one ancestor and then see if you can go back one more. Um, and that's literally how we ended up figuring out that my third great grandfather served in the Civil War. No one in the family knew that or could pass that on. And it's because he just didn't talk about it. He passed away in 1908 or 1910. And that story died with him. But if you can just go back one more ancestor and see, get a name, um, where were they living, what census records are available, and then connect that to what you're doing in history. There are, um, even if you're looking at literature, and the American Revolution, things like that. So if you have a student who, loves to write, there are like even books about Phyllis Wheatley. There are so many great picture books out there um, by Black authors and illustrators giving these full stories, many of which we didn't have when I was growing up. So that's one challenge there, linking your own family story to history. Anybody else want to share? Let's think then about a special interest. Is there any special interest that your young learner has, your young scholar has? Whether it's video games or um, music or art or um, Legos, video game. Oh, Jason, the reading, that's, oh my goodness, it's halfway there. Yay, yay. Video games. Let's think about the history of video games. What is the first video game? That could be an entire unit study right there. And maybe thinking about a person who's significant in the field of video games, past or present, and how we can link that. Are there books that talk about video games or feature video games as a springboard for the plot, the setting? That unit plan, think about how you can incorporate the history, um, maybe language arts, art, math, science, health. Go from that one interest and see how we can branch off from there. Any other And Jason, is there a particular type of book or genre when you say reading? And could we, oh, okay. Oh, nice. Um, once we start to think about comics, and graphic novels, that opens up a whole world, because that really brings the history to life. It's literally jumping off of the pages. Um, can we take a particular topic that we're studying, and then challenge our young person to create a comic based around that? Can we take our reading of comics and transition or transfer that into the writing of comics? Then can we maybe look at the art that goes into that, and then moving into the self-publishing process? And then your young person has literally made history, writing and producing and selling their own works. It's it gives such ownership, and it really challenges the concept of what learning is. It's so much more than just us receiving, but when we're active participants in that learning process, it really sticks. Any other interests or ancestors for the paper dolls? Whoever you can find, um, you can put names, get a Velcro sticky dot, you can put a name for that particular person. It can be your ancestor. You can swap it out. That can be Ona Judge. Okay. If you're reading about Equiano, you could use one for Equiano, or if you have an ancestor's name, you can put that on there. And here is a real person. Okay, this is a person that is in our family. Um, Using those to move around, you could have them, even if some students are really into creating clothing, designing. The challenge could be, can you design a smock or a cape or a hat or a coat or whatever? Would that be something that you could sew or put together? Okay. Um, Even down to hair fashion of the day. Take that interest, take that one little nugget. It's like a snowflake, so appropriate for the weather we've had, but like a snowflake. And then we're just building onto it. As it falls, we're building onto what else we could add to learn. Any questions or suggestions? And comments? If you can find, and there are plenty out there, um, graphic novels, retelling history, um, use those. Find the unit studies, jump on to familysearch.org, ancestry.com. Find your family story, weave that into history, make it pop, make it come alive. Continue to tell your ancestors' stories through your homeschooling journey, knowing that our ancestors took ownership of their learning. They created these small learning pods and opportunities and one-room schoolhouses. They are still with us um, on our journey. And when we call their names, they are activated into the space. Um, and history becomes our story, our eternal story. right, that's all the time that I have for today. Thank you all for joining me. Um,
Thank you, Sherri, for a wonderful presentation. We appreciate it immensely. Thank you for sharing all of this wisdom and this beautiful information.
Thank you all. And please feel free to reach out. I'm at freedomwriters.org. Thank you so much.